The condo's daddy left are mine, and you can keep the cats and the dog." My daughter Simone laughed as the lawyer finished reading the will of my beloved Andre. Her eyes gleamed with greed, as if she was already calculating how much money she could get by selling the properties that had taken us 45 years of marriage to acquire. My son-in-law, Desmond, a spineless man who had always lived off the crumbs we gave him, completed the humiliation with a cruel smile. "Now you have your family, Jada. The animals are perfect for you." His words echoed in the lawyer's office like a slap that stole my breath. I felt the world collapse beneath my feet. There I was, Jada, a 69-year-old woman who had just buried the love of her life, listening as my only daughter discarded me like garbage. The other relatives present looked down, uncomfortable, but no one said a word in my defense. No one. Simone kept laughing. It was that shrill laugh I had known since she was a little girl, but now it sounded different, colder, more calculated. "Mom, let's be real. You're older now. You don't need that much space. Besides, you always preferred those animals over people." Every word was like a knife twisting in my heart. The lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably and looked away. I had known that man for 20 years. He had handled all our legal affairs, and now he couldn't even look me in the eye. "Mrs. Sterling," he mumbled, "I am truly sorry about the circumstances, but the will is crystal clear. The 3 condominiums are transferred to Simone, and you, well, you have the animals and your personal belongings." I remembered everything I had done for her. When she was 8 and broke her leg, I quit my job as a secretary at the textile mill to care for her for 3 months. I lost that job we desperately needed, but I didn't care. My baby needed me. When she wanted to study medicine and we didn't have the cash, Andre and I sold our car, the red Chevy we both loved so much, and pawned our wedding rings to pay for her college tuition. I calculated in my head, between the university, the books, the apartment we rented for her near campus, the food, the clothes, and the medical expenses. When she got hepatitis in her junior year, we must have invested over $100,000 in her education. $100,000 that came out of our savings, from the overtime Andre worked in construction, from the nights I sewed clothes for other families after my regular shifts. When she married Desmond, we paid for the entire wedding. I remember every detail of those expenses because I handled the accounts personally. $7,000 for the wedding gown she insisted on buying at that designer boutique, $4,000 for the venue, $2,000 for the flowers, $1,500 for the photographer, another $1,500 for the music. A total of $20,000, representing 2 full years of our savings. During her pregnancy, when she had complications with her blood pressure, I slept at the hospital for 3 consecutive weeks. Andre would come after work to relieve me, but I never fully left. I fed her, brought her favorite meals, read her books, and massaged her swollen feet. When doctors said she needed absolute bed rest, I temporarily moved into her house to care for her 24 hours a day. When she lost the baby in her 7th month, I was the one who held her while she cried. Desmond didn't know what to do. He felt overwhelmed and escaped to work or to the bars with his friends. I stayed with her night after night, listening to her pain, wiping her tears, preparing chamomile tea when she couldn't sleep. I was the one who helped her overcome the depression that followed, who paid for her psychological therapy for 2 full years, $180 per session, twice a week. During Andre's illness, as cancer slowly consumed him, Simone barely showed up at our house. She always had excuses: work at the medical office where she was a receptionist, social commitments with Desmond, weekend trips. I cared for my husband alone, bathing him, feeding him, giving him his medicine, taking him to chemotherapy 3 times a week for 8 months. And now, after all that, after giving her my whole life, she was kicking me out of the house as if I were a stranger. I looked at my 2 cats, Luna and Star, 2 beautiful Persian cats who had come into our family as abandoned babies I found in the rain, and at my dog Captain, an older golden retriever who had been Andre's inseparable companion during his final years. "That's fine. I finally said in a voice I didn't recognize as my own, firm and calm despite the hurricane I felt inside. "I'll take my real family with me." I stood up from the chair with all the dignity I could muster. I took the animals' leashes and walked toward the door. Simone yelled behind me, "Don't forget to take their toys and beds, too. I don't want anything of those critters in my properties." Her voice sounded victorious, as if she had won the lottery. Desmond laughed beside her, and I could hear his scornful comments as I walked down the hall. "Finally, we're rid of the old woman and her pets," I heard Desmond whisper to Simone. "Now we can sell the condos and move to Miami like we always wanted." Simone replied between laughs, "Yes, and without having to support Mom and her medical expenses. She's old now, let her fend for herself." I left the building with my 3 companions, feeling the weight of the betrayal like a slab on my back. The afternoon sun blinded me as I walked down the sidewalk with Luna, Star, and Captain, or perhaps it was the tears struggling to escape, which I refused to shed. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. For 40 years, I had been the perfect wife, the selfless mother, the helpful daughter-in-law, and now I realized it had all been in vain. As I put the animals in the back seat of my old 2010 Honda Civic, Luna came over and rubbed her head against my cheek, as if she understood my pain. Star purred softly, and Captain licked my hand with that loyalty only animals can give. In that moment, I understood something I hadn't seen clearly before. They truly were my family, the only one I had left, the only one who would never abandon me. I started the car with trembling hands and drove aimlessly through the city streets of Charlotte. Everything looked different now, as if I had woken up from a 45-year dream. The buildings, the stores, even the red traffic lights seemed strange, as if I were seeing them for the first time with these new eyes, the eyes of a betrayed woman. I stopped at a traffic light and looked in the rearview mirror at my companions. Captain was 12 years old now. His brown eyes showed that wisdom that only years can bestow. Luna and Star, my 8-year-old Persian cats, had curled up together in the seat, as they always did when they sensed tension in the air. They had been silent witnesses to everything. The arguments between Simone and me, the time she came home asking for money, the nights Andre and I stayed awake worrying about her future. I remembered the first time Simone brought Desmond home. I had prepared his favorite meal, chicken and mushroom sauce, and bought a $50 bottle of French wine, a luxury we couldn't afford, but which I did for her. Desmond arrived 2 hours late without apologizing, and throughout the dinner, he only talked about money, how much doctors earned, the luxury cars he wanted to buy, the houses in exclusive neighborhoods. "Your daughter has potential," he had told Andre that night, as if Simone were an investment object. "With my contact at the private hospital, she could get a better-paying job. Of course, she'd need to take some specialization courses, but those are only about $15,000. And like a fool, I had nodded, thinking he truly loved her and wanted the best for her. During their 5 years of dating, Desmond never held a stable job. He always had projects, business ideas that required initial investment. Andre loaned him money 3 times, $3,000 for a used car sales business that never prospered, $1,500 for a computer course he dropped halfway through, and another $1,500 for working capital for a cleaning company that lasted exactly 2 months. He never paid back a single cent. When Andre asked him about the money, Desmond always had excuses. "The business is growing slowly. I need to reinvest the profits. Next month for sure." And Simone always defended him. "Daddy, you have to give him time. Desmond is very smart. He just needs the right opportunity." After the wedding, things got worse. Desmond got a job as an insurance salesman, but he never lasted more than 6 months at any company. It was always the fault of the bosses, the jealous colleagues, the tough market. Meanwhile, Simone worked as a receptionist at a medical office, earning barely $1,000 a month, but Desmond convinced her that he would handle the big expenses. Of course, we paid the big expenses. When their car broke down, they came to ask Andre for $5,000 for the repairs. When Desmond wanted to change careers and study digital marketing, he needed $3,000 for the course. When they moved to a bigger apartment because they needed space for the baby who was coming, the $2,000 security deposit came out of our savings. During Simone's pregnancy, Desmond emotionally disappeared. He went out with his friends every night, came home drunk, and Simone would call me crying on the phone. "Mom, I don't know what to do. He says the pregnancy has made me too sensitive, that he needs to distract himself so he doesn't get stressed." And I, as always, defended the family. "Men sometimes get nervous with the first pregnancy, sweetheart. It'll pass once the baby is born." But the baby never made it. At 7 months, Simone developed severe preeclampsia, and doctors had to perform an emergency C-section. Little Andre, we were going to name him after his grandfather, weighed barely 2 pounds and fought for 3 days in the intensive care unit before closing his eyes forever. During those 3 hellish days, I didn't move from the hospital. Desmond showed up on the first day, cried a little for the cameras, and then disappeared. He had urgent work matters he couldn't postpone. Simone was shattered, her body full of hormones and her heart broken, and I was the one who comforted her, who talked to the doctors, who made the difficult decisions. After the funeral, which we also paid for because Desmond claimed the health insurance didn't cover funeral costs, Simone fell into a deep depression. She wouldn't leave her bed, wouldn't eat, wouldn't bathe. Desmond, instead of supporting her, started complaining. "I can't live like this, Jada. She doesn't do anything around the house, no cooking, no cleaning. I work all day and come home to this mess." So I started going to their house every day. I cleaned, cooked, washed clothes, and slowly helped Simone get back on her feet. I found a psychologist, Dr. Avery, who charged $180 per session. For 2 years, twice a week, I drove Simone to therapy, $720 a month that came out of Andre's retirement check and my small part-time job cleaning offices. Now, driving through the streets with my only faithful companions, I mentally calculated everything we had spent on Simone and Desmond over the years. No less than nearly $200,000 between tuition, unpaid loans, medical emergencies, gifts, and wedding expenses. Nearly $200,000 that represented our life savings, the fruit of 45 years of honest work and sacrifice. And this is how she had repaid me, kicking me out like an old dog, laughing at me in front of strangers, humiliating me at the worst moment of my life. But as I stroked Captain's head at the next traffic light, a strange feeling of freedom began to grow in my chest. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to worry about Simone, her problems, her fake tears, her constant demands for money. I drove to the small 1-bedroom apartment I had rented the week before when I sensed this moment would arrive. It was a modest place in a quiet neighborhood, but it had a small patio where the animals could run. It cost $800 a month, almost half of my pension, but it was all I could afford now that I knew Simone would never help me again. As I took out the few belongings I had managed to pack before the will reading, I realized something liberating. For the first time in years, I could make decisions only for myself. I didn't have to ask anyone if I could buy cat food or if Captain needed to go to the vet. I didn't have to listen to complaints about pet hair on the furniture or the cost of their vaccinations. That first night in my new home, as Luna and Star explored every corner of the apartment and Captain settled into his favorite bed, I received a call from Simone. Her voice sounded sweet, falsely worried. "Mom, how are you? Did you find somewhere to stay yet?" "I'm fine, Simone," I replied dryly. I owed no explanation to the one who had publicly humiliated me. There was an uncomfortable silence on the other end of the line. She was expecting me to beg, to ask for forgiveness, to plead for a place to sleep. But those times were over. "Look, Mom," she continued with that manipulative voice I also knew, "I've been thinking, maybe I was a little hard on you today. It's just that the pain of Daddy's death has made me very sensitive. Why don't you come over for dinner tomorrow? We can talk like civilized people." I knew exactly what she was doing. Simone had calculated how much it would cost to keep me, and Desmond had surely made her see that it was cheaper to have me living with them as a free maid than to pay for a housekeeper. But I was no longer the naive woman from that morning. "No, thank you," I replied firmly. "I'm very comfortable here with my family." And I hung up the phone. I felt a strange satisfaction, as if a weight had been lifted off me. It was the first time in 40 years I had told Simone no without explaining myself. The following days were spent adjusting. I established a simple routine: waking up early, preparing breakfast for myself and the animals, taking Captain for a walk in the nearby park while the cats slept in the sun on the patio. It was a simple life, but there was peace in that simplicity. Andre had left me a small life insurance policy, $30,000 that Simone didn't know existed because he had taken it out years ago without mentioning it to anyone. With that money and my modest $1,500 monthly pension, I could live frugally but decently for a few years, as long as no major medical emergencies arose. One afternoon, while organizing the few belongings I had managed to get out of the house, I found a box Andre had kept in the closet. Inside, there were documents I didn't recognize, some papers in English that seemed to be investment titles, and a letter addressed to me in his shaky handwriting from the last few months. "My dearest Jada," the letter read, "if you are reading this, it is because I am no longer with you and because things with Simone have turned out as I feared. I never told you, but for years I saw how she manipulated you, how she used you, how she only came home when she needed something. I tried to talk to you several times, but you always defended her. It's natural, she's your daughter. But she is also a selfish woman who learned she could have everything without giving anything in return." My hands trembled as I read. Andre had seen what I refused to accept. The letter continued. "That's why I've taken some precautions. Not everything is in the official will that Simone knows about. I have made some investments in your name that only you can access. There is also something very important about Luna, Star, and Captain that you will soon discover. My friend Marcus, the veterinarian, has specific instructions. When you're ready, go see him." My heart was pounding fast. What had Andre done? Why all the mystery? But before I could reflect more deeply on the letter, the phone rang again. It was Simone, and this time her voice sounded different, more urgent. "Mom, I need us to talk. I've been thinking about everything that happened, and I think I made a mistake. Why don't you come home? It's your house too, after all." Her tone had completely changed. She was no longer the arrogant woman from the lawyer's office, but the usual manipulative daughter who knew exactly what words to use to break down my defenses. "My home is here now," I replied, surprised by my own firmness. "And I'm not alone. I have Luna, Star, and Captain. They have never lied to me, never used me, never humiliated me in front of strangers." "Please, Mom, animals are not real family. I'm your daughter, your only daughter. I know we've had differences, but we can fix this. Desmond wants you back too. He says the house feels empty without you." A lie. Desmond had never wanted me there. For years he had made sarcastic comments about the mother-in-law who never left, about the old woman who was always involved in everything. What was really happening was that they had realized how much work I did in the house for free. I cleaned, cooked, washed, ironed, did the shopping, and took care of the garden. "Simone?" I said with a voice I had never used with her, cold and definitive. "Yesterday you made it very clear what my place is in your life. You said the animals were my only family, and you were right. They are my family, and I am happy with them." "But Mom, you can't live alone. What's going to happen if you get sick? Who's going to take care of you? How are you going to pay for medical expenses with your miserable pension?" There was the real Simone. As soon as she didn't get what she wanted nicely, the insults and threats disguised as concern came out. "I'll manage," I replied simply. "For 45 years, I managed to take care of all of you. I think I can take care of myself and 3 little animals." I hung up the phone and sat down in my small living room with Luna on my lap and Star at my feet, while Captain rested his head on my shoes. For the first time since Andre's death, I felt at peace. It wasn't the life I had dreamed of for my golden years, but it was my life, and no one else could snatch it away or manipulate it to suit their convenience. The next day, I decided to do something I had been putting off since Andre's death, taking the animals for their annual checkup. During the last few months of my husband's illness, I had neglected many things, including routine visits to the vet. I knew that Marcus, Dr. Jennings, had been Andre's friend since childhood and had always treated us with special affection. The veterinary clinic was located downtown in a 2-story building that Marcus had bought years ago when his business prospered. I remembered when he and Andre worked together in construction before Marcus decided to study veterinary medicine at age 30. My husband always said Marcus was the most determined man he knew. He worked by day and studied by night for 6 years until he earned his degree. I entered the clinic with my 3 companions, and the receptionist greeted me with a sad smile. "Mrs. Sterling, we are so sorry for Mr. Sterling's passing. Dr. Jennings is expecting you. He told me that when you showed up here, I should take you straight to his office." It seemed strange that he was expecting me, but I thought maybe it was just courtesy toward the widow of his old friend. Marcus appeared at his office door, a 65-year-old man with gray hair and kind eyes behind gold-framed glasses. He hugged me with his usual affection. "Jada, my dear friend, how are you? I know these have been very difficult months for you." His voice had that warmth that had always reassured me. During Andre's illness, Marcus had come to the house several times to examine the animals when I couldn't bring them because I was caring for my husband. "I'm fine, Marcus, or at least I'm trying to be," I replied as Luna and Star curiously explored the office. Captain, who already knew the place, lay down quietly in his favorite corner by the window. Marcus closed the door and looked at me with a serious expression. "Jada, Andre came to see me 2 weeks before he died. He told me something very specific, that when you showed up here with the animals, I should check their collars very carefully. He said it was very important, that your future depended on it." My heart started beating faster. I remembered the letter I had found where Andre mentioned that Marcus had specific instructions. "What did he mean by that?" I asked, although a part of me already suspected I was about to discover something important. "I don't know exactly," Marcus replied as he approached Luna, "but he insisted a lot that I check the inside of the collars, especially the ID tags. He said he had engraved something very important there." His expert hands began to examine the red velvet collar that Luna had worn since she was a kitten. As Marcus worked carefully not to hurt the cat, I watched every movement with a mixture of anxiety and hope. Andre had always been a mysterious man in certain aspects, very careful with money and important documents. During our married life, he had made financial decisions without consulting me, not out of male chauvinism, but because he said he worried about me stressing too much over numbers. "There's something here," Marcus murmured as he examined the gold tag hanging from Luna's collar. "Look, Jada, there are very small numbers engraved here. They look like geographic coordinates, and there's also a numerical sequence that seems to be an access code." I leaned in to see better. Indeed, in tiny letters that could barely be read without a magnifying glass, there was a series of numbers engraved on the back of the tag. Text 75589, I am a circle. Text NN. Text 73.180 Circle. Text. What? Code. Text ALF. 2023, 845. My breathing quickened. What did all this mean? Marcus continued examining the other collars. On Star's tag, he found a similar but different sequence. High text 255 7 Circ. Text N 80.1918. Circ. Text Waka. Code. Text S223 CL 6. And on Captain's collar, The oldest and most worn of them all, there was a third combination. Text 2. Circ. Text N 118.247. Circ. Text. Code. Text Cap 2023 CL 974. Marcus, I said in a trembling voice, do you know what these coordinates mean? He went to his computer and started typing the numbers into a mapping program. Slowly the locations appeared on the screen. The first coordinate corresponds to New York, Marcus said with increasing astonishment, specifically to Manhattan, very close to the financial district. The second is Miami, Florida in the Brickell area, and the third is Los Angeles, California in the downtown area. My mind began to process the information. Andre had worked for years as a construction supervisor on international projects. I remembered he had traveled to the United States several times for work, especially during the 80s and 90s, when his construction company had large contracts in those cities. But what do the codes mean? I asked, although I already had a suspicion that both terrified and excited me. Marcus shrugged, as confused as I was. Suddenly, I remembered something. In the box of documents I had found at home, there were papers in English that seemed to be from U.S. banks. I rushed to my purse and pulled out one of the documents I had brought with me to ask Marcus if he understood English better than I did. "Look at this," I said, extending a letterhead from what appeared to be a New York bank. Marcus read aloud. Certificate of Deposit, account holder Jada Maria Sterling. Account number, Powertext/ELF 2023 CL dollars. It was the exact same code that was engraved on Luna's collar. "My God, Jada," Marcus murmured. "I think your husband deposited money in U.S. banks in your name and stored the access codes in the animal's collar so only you could find them." My legs nearly gave out. I sat down in the consultation chair while Marcus continued examining the documents. There were certificates of deposit, investment statements, and property documents that he didn't fully understand, but which clearly indicated that I was the legal owner of certain assets in the United States. "How much money could it be?" I asked in a barely audible voice. Marcus studied the documents carefully, pulling out a calculator to total the figures that appeared on different papers. "Jada," he finally said with an expression of total disbelief. "According to these documents, in certificates of deposit alone, you have approximately $275,000 distributed across the 3 banks. But there's more. Investments in mutual funds, stocks in U.S. companies, and what appear to be shares in real estate properties." The world began to spin around me. For years, while Simone and Desmond saw me as an economic burden, while they humiliated me and made me feel like I was a useless old woman dependent on their charity, I had a fortune hidden in another country. A fortune that Andre had patiently built for decades, working on international projects and saving every penny to secure my future. "But Marcus," I said when I finally regained my voice, "how am I going to access that money? I don't know anything about U.S. banks. I don't speak English perfectly. I don't even have a valid passport." The reality of my situation began to overwhelm me. Having money abroad was one thing, but being able to use it was completely different. Marcus smiled and pulled a thicker envelope from his desk. "Andre also left this for you. He said that when you discovered the collars, I should give it to you." Inside the envelope were more documents, including a power of attorney where Andre authorized me to carry out all the necessary bank transactions, and something that left me speechless, a U.S. passport in my name. "How is this possible?" I murmured, examining the document that looked completely legal and official. Marcus read an attached letter explaining the situation. Apparently, during the years Andre worked on construction projects in the United States, he had started a legal residency process that he never told me about. I was listed as his dependent spouse, and after years of silent processing, we had obtained permanent residency. "Jada, according to these documents, you have the legal right to live and work in the United States. Andre completed the entire process without telling you because he wanted to surprise you when he retired. The plan was for you to move to Miami together when he turned 70. Tears began to roll down my cheeks. My husband had planned our future down to the last detail, even foreseeing that something might happen to him sooner than expected. Over the next few hours, Marcus helped me understand the magnitude of what Andre had done. He hadn't just saved money in U.S. banks, he had bought stakes in several real estate projects. There was a 2-bedroom apartment in a building in Miami that was completely paid for and in my name. There were shares in technology companies that had grown exponentially over the last few years. The total value of your assets, Marcus explained after making preliminary calculations, could be close to $700,000, maybe more. And that's without counting the Miami apartment, which, according to the most recent appraisal documents, is worth approximately $300,000 more. $1 million. It was a figure I couldn't fully process. All my life, I had lived counting pennies, worrying about paying the bills for the month, limiting my expenses to the bare minimum. And now, it turned out I was a millionaire, that I had enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life without depending on anyone. That night, back in my small apartment, I couldn't sleep. Luna and Star seemed to sense my agitation and nestled closer to me than usual. Captain lay down next to my bed as if he were my personal bodyguard. I looked at them with infinite gratitude. Without them, I would never have discovered the gift Andre had left me. The next day, as I was having breakfast and trying to process all the information, my phone rang. It was Simone, but this time her voice sounded different, more aggressive. "Mom, we need to talk. I've been asking around and they told me you went to the veterinary clinic yesterday. Why did you take the animals? Are they sick?" "It was just a routine checkup," I replied calmly. I wasn't ready to reveal what I had discovered. I needed time to plan my next steps carefully. "Look, Mom, I've decided you're right. The animals are important to you, and I've been too hard on you. Why don't you come back home and bring the pets? We can make it work." Her change of tone was so obvious it was pathetic. Something had happened that made her desperate to reconcile with me. "What happened, Simone? Why the sudden change?" I asked, genuinely curious. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Well, Desmond and I have been talking, and we realize the house is very empty without you, and also, we've had some unexpected expenses. The air conditioner broke, and the repair cost $2,500. We also need to fix the roof because there's a leak, and that's another $3,500. We thought if you came back, you could help us with those expenses, like you always did with Daddy." There was the truth. They didn't miss me, they missed my money. For years, when domestic emergencies arose, Andre and I had always put up the money to solve them. Simone and Desmond had gotten so used to that dynamic that they assumed I would continue to be their personal source of financing. "Simone," I said with a new voice, a voice that sounded secure and firm, "yesterday you made it very clear that my place in your life is with the animals, and you know what? You were right. I'm very happy here, and I'm not planning to return." "But Mom, $6,000 is a lot of money. Where are we going to get that cash? You know Desmond's job isn't going well, and I don't earn enough at the office." "That's no longer my problem, Simone. For 40 years it was my problem, but not anymore." And for the second time in my life, I hung up the phone on my daughter, but this time I didn't feel guilt, but a strange sense of power. In the following days, Marcus helped me contact the U.S. banks. With the collar codes and my legal documentation, I was able to verify that all the assets were indeed in my name and that I could access them whenever I wanted. We also confirmed that the apartment in Miami was completely paid for and ready to be lived in. A week later, while walking Captain in the park, my phone rang again. This time it was Desmond, and his voice sounded desperate. "Jada, please, we need to talk. Simone is really upset. She cries all the time saying she lost her mom, and we really need your help with the house repairs." "Desmond," I replied calmly, "when you kicked me out of the house, you said very clearly that I wasn't family, that the animals were my only family. Well, I stayed with my family, and we are very happy together." But Jada, you can't live on your pension forever. What's going to happen when you get sick? Who's going to take care of you? We are your real family, not the animals. I laughed, a genuine laugh I hadn't felt in years. Desmond, for years you all saw me as an economic burden. You always assumed I didn't have resources of my own, that I was completely dependent on you. Well, let me tell you something. You were completely wrong. There was silence on the other end of the line. What do you mean? He asked in an uncertain voice. I mean that I'm perfectly fine financially, better than I ever imagined, and I don't need anyone's charity, especially from people who humiliated me at the worst moment of my life. After hanging up with Desmond, I sat in my small living room and looked at my 3 companions. Luna was cleaning her paws with that elegance only cats have. Star slept curled up on her favorite cushion, and Captain watched me with those wise eyes that seemed to understand every word I had said. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. It was time to claim the life Andre had planned for me. I called Marcus and told him I wanted to start the paperwork to travel to the United States as soon as possible. He offered to accompany me as a translator and moral support. And although I initially resisted because I didn't want to be a bother, I finally accepted. Having a trusted friend on this adventure would be invaluable. 3 days later, as I was organizing my documents for the trip, I received an unexpected visit. Simone appeared at my apartment door without warning, her eyes red from crying and an expression I hadn't seen since she was a child. For a moment, my mother's heart softened, but I immediately recalled her cruel words in the lawyer's office. Mom, please let me in. We need to talk as mother and daughter, she pleaded from the threshold. Her hands were trembling, and she looked genuinely distressed. I decided to listen to what she had to say, though maintaining my emotional distance. Fine, Simone, but make it quick. The animals get nervous with visitors, I said, deliberately lying. Luna approached and purred around Simone's legs, as if holding no grudge for the past insults. Animals are nobler than humans, I thought. Simone sat on the edge of the sofa, uncomfortable in the small space that was now my home. Mom, I know I've made terrible mistakes. The things I said to you in the lawyer's office were unforgivable. I was hurting over Daddy's death, and I think I directed all my rage at you instead of processing it correctly. She sounded sincere, but I had heard her manipulative apologies for decades. And what about Desmond? Is he also sorry for calling me an old woman and laughing while you humiliated me? I asked directly. Simone looked down. Desmond has his problems. He's been drinking more since he lost his job last month. The insurance company fired him because he wasn't meeting sales quotas. We're going through a very difficult financial time. There it was. The truth was not genuine remorse for treating me badly. It was financial panic. Simone, I said calmly, for 40 years, I solved your financial problems. I paid your tuition, the wedding, loaned Desmond money multiple times, paid for your psychological therapy, and helped you with every crisis. And how did you repay me? By kicking me out of my own home. Mom, I know it was horrible, but I was confused, scared. When Daddy died, I realized I was now responsible for everything. The house, the bills, taking care of you. I felt overwhelmed and reacted badly. I stood up and walked to the window, where Captain was lying down sunbathing. Simone, there's something you don't understand. You were never responsible for taking care of me. I am an adult woman, perfectly capable of caring for myself. The problem is that for years, you all treated me as if I were mentally disabled, unable to make my own decisions. But Mom, you were always so submissive, so dependent on Daddy. I never saw you make important decisions alone. Her words stung because they held some truth. Andre and I had a traditional marriage where he handled the finances and big decisions, and I took care of the home and family. But that didn't mean I was incapable. It meant we had divided responsibilities in a way that worked for us. Perhaps you're right, I admitted, but that is changing. I am learning to make my own decisions, to live my life the way I want, not the way others expect me to live it. Simone approached me with tears in her eyes. Mom, please give me a chance to fix things. Come back home. We can seek professional help, family therapy. we can learn to communicate better. For a moment, I felt the familiar temptation to give in, to be the understanding mother who forgives everything, who sacrifices her dignity for family peace. But then I looked at Luna, who had jumped onto my lap, and remembered Andre's words in his letter. She is a selfish woman who learned she could have everything without giving anything in return. "Simone," I said firmly, "I appreciate you coming, but my decision is made. I am not going back to a situation where I am treated as a second-class citizen. I am happy here. I have peace, and for the first time in years, I have control over my own life." Her expression quickly changed from pleading to frustration. "But Mom, this is ridiculous. You can't live alone forever, and don't tell me those animals are going to take care of you when you're sick." "The animals have given me more unconditional love in these past few days than you have in the last few years," I replied without raising my voice. "And as for being alone, I prefer my dignified solitude to your humiliating company." Simone stood up abruptly, and for a moment I saw the spoiled little girl she had been decades ago when she didn't get what she wanted. "Fine. If you want to be a bitter old woman living with cats, that's your problem. But don't come crying when you realize you've made the biggest mistake of your life." She stormed out, slamming the door, which startled Star awake. I stayed there, stroking my pets, and realized something liberating. Her words no longer hurt me as they once did. It was as if I had developed an emotional armor that protected me from her manipulations. That night, I called Marcus and told him I wanted to accelerate the travel plans. "Marcus, I want to go to Miami next week. I need to see that apartment, confirm my investments, and start a new life away from all this toxicity." "Are you sure, Jada? It's a very big step. Don't you want to think about it a little longer?" "I've been thinking about it for 40 years without realizing it," I replied. "Andre left me all the tools to be independent. It would be disrespectful to him and to myself not to take this opportunity." Marcus helped me make the flight reservations for the following week. We decided he would accompany me for the first few days to help me with the banking and legal paperwork, and then he would return to Charlotte while I explored my options in Miami. I also organized everything necessary to travel with Luna, Star, and Captain. The vet paperwork, health certificates, and import permits were complicated, but every completed document felt like one more step toward freedom. My true life companions would come with me on this new adventure. The night before the trip, as I was packing the final bags, my phone rang once more. It was Simone, but this time her voice sounded different, more calculating. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything we talked about yesterday. I think you're right to want independence. But before you make drastic decisions, is there anything you need to know about Daddy's finances?" "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already suspected where the conversation was going. "Well, Desmond has been reviewing some documents Daddy had saved, and it looks like there are some debts we didn't know about. Debts that technically could affect any inheritance or assets he left you." A lie. Pure, desperate manipulation. "Simone, the only assets I care about are my animals and my dignity, and no one can touch those." "But Mom, if there are legal problems with the inheritance, you could lose even your pension. Don't you think it would be better for you to come home where we can protect you?" I hung up the phone and turned it off completely. Tomorrow, I would be on a plane to Miami, toward my new life, and nothing and no one was going to stop me. The flight to Miami was the first time in my life I had flown without Andre. Marcus sat next to me on the plane, while Luna, Star, and Captain traveled in the cargo cabin in their special carriers. During the 4-hour flight, I couldn't stop thinking about how surreal the whole situation was. Just 2 weeks ago, I was a dependent widow living off my daughter's charity, and now I was flying to the United States to claim a fortune I didn't even know existed. When we arrived at the Miami airport, the humid heat hit me like a slap, but there was something in the air, something different that made me feel light. Maybe it was the feeling of being in a place where no one knew me as Andre's poor widow or the mother-in-law who never leaves. Here, I was simply Jada Sterling, a woman with an American passport and a new opportunity in life. The first step was to go to the bank in the Brickell Financial District. Marcus accompanied me as a translator, although I discovered that my school English was better than I remembered. The bank manager, Mr. Jenkins, an African-American man in his 50s with a warm smile, reviewed all my documentation carefully. "Mrs. Sterling," he told me in surprisingly good Spanish, "your husband was very smart. For the past 15 years, he regularly deposited money into certificates of deposit that have been earning compounded interest. Your current balance at this bank is $90,000. $90,000 in a single bank. It was more money than I had seen together in my entire life, but Mr. Jenkins wasn't finished. "I also have specific instructions your husband left. He asked me that when you showed up, I should explain the automated investments he established in your name." He showed me documents detailing investments in mutual funds, stocks in U.S. technology companies, and U.S. government bonds. For years, Andre had been investing methodically, reinvesting the profits, and building a portfolio that was now worth approximately $280,000. "Your husband was very conservative," Mr. Jenkins continued, "but also very intelligent. He diversified his investments and never risked more than 10% in speculative investments. It is a very solid portfolio for a person your age." When we left the bank, Marcus hugged me with tears in his eyes. "Jada, Andre truly loved you. He did all this thinking about you, about your future, so you would never have to depend on anyone." The next step was to see the apartment. It was located in a 20-story building in Brickell Key with an ocean view. When the doorman handed me the keys and we went up to the 18th floor, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment with a large living room, a modern kitchen, and a terrace with a spectacular view of Miami Bay. The furniture was covered with white sheets, as if someone had prepared the place for a long absence. There was a letter from Andre on the dining room table, addressed to me in his familiar handwriting. "My dearest Jada," the letter said, "if you are reading this in this apartment, it means you finally discovered the gift I prepared for you. For years I dreamed of bringing you here, of us living our golden years watching the sea, away from the family pressures and responsibilities that burdened us for decades. I regret not being able to make this trip with you, but I hope you find the peace and happiness you deserve here. The apartment maintenance fees are paid in advance for the next 5 years, and there is enough money in your accounts to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Please, be happy. I love you forever, Andre." I cried like I hadn't cried since his funeral, but this time they weren't tears of pain, but of immense gratitude toward the man who had dedicated the last years of his life to securing my independence and my dignity. That night, as I unpacked the few belongings I had brought and watched Luna, Star, and Captain explore their new home, my phone began to ring insistently. It was an international number I recognized as being from Charlotte. I decided to answer. "Mom, you finally answer!" Simone yelled from the other end of the line. "Where are you? I went to your apartment and the doorman told me you had gone on a trip. Where did you go? With whom? I'm very worried." "I'm perfectly fine, Simone," I replied calmly. "I'm in Miami, in my apartment." I enjoyed the silence that followed my words. "Your apartment? What apartment are you talking about? Are you delusional? Are you being scammed? Please, Mom, tell me exactly where you are so I can come get you." "I'm not delusional, Simone, and no one is scamming me. It turns out your father left me much more than the personal belongings you thought. I have an apartment here, bank accounts, investments. I am financially independent." The silence on the other end lasted for more than a minute. Finally, Simone's voice sounded different, more calculating. "Mom, that's not possible. We reviewed all of Daddy's documents. There was no apartment in Miami in his will." "That's true," I replied, enjoying every word, "because the apartment wasn't in his will. It's in my name. It has been in my name for years, just like the bank accounts and the investments. Your father was very smart. He knew exactly what kind of daughter he had." "That's impossible. If Daddy had that much money, why did we live so modestly? Why did he make me work to pay for my own expenses all those years?" "Because he wanted to teach you the value of work, Simone. And because he knew that if you knew this money existed, you would find a way to spend it before I needed it. There were background noises, as if Simone were talking to someone else. Probably Desmond. Mom, listen to me closely. If that money really exists, we have a legal right to a share. I am the only daughter, and Desmond is part of the family. You can't be so selfish as to keep it all to yourself. I laughed, a genuine laugh that echoed throughout the apartment. Simone, darling, that money was never your father's to leave as an inheritance. It's been in my name for years. I am the one who will decide what to do with it, and I assure you that after how you've treated me, sharing it with you is not in my plans. That's not fair. We are your family. You have moral obligations to us. Moral obligations, I repeated with incredulity. Like the moral obligations you had to me when you kicked me out of my own house? Like the obligations you had when you humiliated me in front of the lawyer and told me the animals were my only family? Mom, I already apologized for that. It was a moment of tension. No, Simone, it was a moment of truth. You finally showed who you really are, and I've decided to take your advice. My animals are my family, and we are living very happily together in our beautiful apartment with an ocean view. You can't do this. I'm going to hire a lawyer. I'm going to prove that Daddy didn't have the right to hide that money. Do it, I replied calmly. My documents are perfectly in order. Everything is completely legal, and I have permanent residency in the United States. But in the meantime, I'm going to enjoy my new life. I hung up the phone and silenced it. I went out to the terrace with my 3 companions, and we watched the sunset over Miami Bay. For the first time in decades, I felt completely at peace, completely free, completely in control of my own destiny. The following days in Miami were like living in a dream. Marcus stayed with me for 1 more week to help me with all the banking and legal paperwork, but mainly to make sure I could handle everything alone. During those days, we discovered that Andre had been even more provident than we imagined. He had hired a property management company that handled the building maintenance, and he had also left contacts for doctors, veterinarians, and even an immigration lawyer in case I needed legal help. Everything was perfectly organized, as if he had designed a complete new life for me. The apartment had details that only Andre could have thought of. He had bought plants he knew I would like. He had chosen comfortable but elegant furniture, and in the main closet, I found new clothes in my size, with tags indicating they had been purchased just 6 months before his death. Even in his last days, when cancer had him weak, he had been planning my future. One morning, as I was having breakfast on the terrace, watching Captain chase seagulls and the cats sleep in the sun, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, I heard the familiar voice of someone I didn't expect. It was Tasha, my second cousin who lived in Atlanta and with whom I had lost contact since Andre's funeral. Jada, my love, how are you? I've been trying to locate you for weeks. I went to your house, and the neighbors told me you no longer live there. Simone gave me your number and told me a very strange story about you living in Miami. I was happy to hear a familiar and loving voice after so many tensions. Hello, Tasha, dear. Yes, it's true. I'm living in Miami. It's a long story, but how is that possible? Simone told me Andre left you hidden money and that you left without saying anything. She's very upset. She says you're acting very strangely and that she's worried about your mental health. There was Simone, manipulating even the extended family, painting me as a senile old woman who had lost her mind. Tasha, my mental health is perfect. What happened is that I finally discovered Andre had made investments in the United States and gotten me legal residency. I decided to start a new life here away from certain family toxicities. But Jada, do you think it's wise to be alone so far from family? Simone told me you left with the cats and the dog, but what's going to happen if you get sick? If you need help? It was incredible how Simone had managed to convince everyone that I was a poor, defenseless old woman who had lost her mind. Tasha, I'm 69, not 90. I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself. And as for family, after how Simone and Desmond treated me, I prefer to be alone than badly accompanied. But what exactly happened? Simone just told me you had an argument after the will reading. I told Tasha the whole story, the public humiliation, the cruel words, how they kicked me out of my own home. I also explained the discovery of the collars and the secret inheritance Andre had left me. Tasha listened in silence, and when I finished, there was a long pause. "My God, Jada," she finally murmured. "I knew Simone had a difficult temper, but I never thought she would be capable of treating you like that. And Desmond? I never liked that man. He always seemed like an opportunist." "Did you know anything about Andre's investments?" I asked her. "Well, he mentioned to me once that he had some savings put aside, but he never gave me details. He said it was his life insurance for you, so you would never have to depend on anyone. I'm glad he kept his promise." That conversation with Tasha reassured me. It was good to know that at least one person in the family understood my situation and didn't judge me for taking control of my life. She promised to stay in touch with me and not reveal my exact address to Simone. 2 days later, Marcus returned to Charlotte, and I was officially alone in my new life. But I didn't feel alone. I had Luna, Star, and Captain. I had the freedom to do whatever I wanted whenever I wanted. And for the first time in decades, I had economic security without depending on anyone. I established a routine that filled me with peace. I woke up early and walked Captain along the bay walk. I had breakfast on the terrace while the cats sunbathed. I went to the supermarket, the bank, and got to know the neighborhood. In the afternoons, I read books I had bought in Spanish at a local bookstore, and at night I watched movies or talked on the phone with Tasha and other relatives who gradually reconnected with me. But the peace did not last long. One afternoon, when I returned from buying food for the animals, the building doorman handed me a certified letter that had arrived from Charlotte. It was from a law firm, representing Simone Sterling Harris. The letter was a formal lawsuit questioning my mental capacity to manage large financial assets. Simone alleged that I was suffering from senile dementia, had been the victim of an international scam, and needed a legal guardianship to protect my interests. She asked a judge to freeze all my assets until I could demonstrate my mental competence through psychological evaluations. My hands trembled as I read the document. Simone had not only betrayed me emotionally, now she was trying to destroy me legally. She wanted to declare me mentally incompetent so she could control my money as my legal guardian. I immediately called the lawyer Andre had recommended in Miami, Dr. Cohen, a Cuban-American specializing in international law. When I explained the situation, he was outraged. "Mrs. Sterling, this is a desperate maneuver with no legal basis. Your assets are in the United States. You have legal residency here, and no court has jurisdiction over your U.S. finances. Furthermore, to prove mental incompetence, they would have to demonstrate that you are making irrational decisions with your money, and moving to an apartment that was already yours is not irrational." "But doctor, they can create legal problems. They can try to get me deported or something." "Don't worry. We are going to respond to this lawsuit aggressively, and we are going to take preventive measures to protect your assets. I also suggest you undergo a voluntary psychological evaluation with a certified psychiatrist here in Miami to have official documentation of your perfect mental health." Over the following days, while Dr. Cohen prepared the legal response, my phone did not stop ringing. Simone called at all hours, sometimes pleading, sometimes threatening, sometimes feigning maternal concern. "Mom, please understand I'm doing this for your own good. You can't handle so much money alone. You could be scammed. They could take advantage of you. I just want to protect you." "Simone," I replied, with a voice that sounded more confident every day, "the only person who has taken advantage of me for years has been you. And now that I am finally independent, you try to take away that independence with legal lies." "They're not lies. You're not acting rationally. A woman your age doesn't go alone to another country with a few animals." "A woman my age does whatever she pleases with her money and her life," I replied, and hung up the phone. That night, sitting on my terrace, watching the Miami lights reflect on the water, stroking Luna while Star played with a ball and Captain slept at my feet, I realized something fundamental. For the first time in my life, I was fighting for myself, not for others, and that gave me a strength I didn't know I had. The legal battle was just beginning, but I had something Simone didn't: the truth, the law on my side, and the determination of a woman who had discovered her own power. The psychological evaluation I underwent with Dr. Avery, a forensic psychiatrist recommended by my lawyer, was a revealing experience. For 3 hours, I answered questions, solved puzzles, and talked about my life, my decisions, and my future plans. At the end, Dr. Avery looked at me with a smile. "Mrs. Sterling, you have the clearest mind and the most organized ideas of many patients I've seen half your age. Not only are there no signs of dementia or cognitive impairment, but you show a remarkable capacity for adaptation and rational decision-making. Your recent life choices demonstrate emotional maturity and excellent practical judgment." 3 weeks later, Dr. Cohen called me with extraordinary news. "Jada, I have excellent news. First, the court completely dismissed your daughter's lawsuit. They have no jurisdiction over the U.S. assets of a legal American resident. Second, and this is the best part, we have filed a countersuit for defamation and legal harassment. Your daughter will have to pay our legal fees, which amount to $10,000. But the surprises didn't end there. I have also received communication from the bank where you have your investments. Your technology stocks have had exceptional growth in recent months. Your portfolio is now worth approximately $450,000, almost double what we initially calculated. $450,000 plus the $90,000 in certificates of deposit, plus the apartment valued at $300,000. I was a millionaire. A 69-year-old millionaire who 3 months ago lived off emotional and economic crumbs. That afternoon, as I celebrated with a glass of wine on the terrace and watched my 3 companions enjoy the sea breeze, my phone rang one last time. It was Simone, but her voice sounded completely different. Broken, defeated. "Mom," she said in a barely audible voice, "I received the court notification, also the lawsuit you filed against me." There was a long pause. "Mom, please, I didn't know things had gone this far. I never wanted us to end up as legal enemies." "Simone," I replied with a calm that surprised even me, "you didn't want us to end up as enemies. You wanted us to end up as we always were, you controlling and me obeying. But those times are over forever. Is there no way to fix this, for us to go back to being mother and daughter?" I remained silent for a moment, watching Luna chase a butterfly on the terrace. "Simone, you killed that relationship the day you humiliated me in front of the lawyer. You decided that the animals were my only family. Well, I accepted your advice, and I have discovered that you were right. They are my family, my true family. And the money? Are you going to keep it all to yourself?" "The money is mine, Simone. It has always been mine. Your father was wise enough to put it in my name, because he knew exactly what kind of person you are. And yes, I'm going to keep it all. I'm going to use this money to live the life he dreamed for me, the life I deserve after 45 years of sacrifice." "But Mom, Desmond lost his job. We're in debt. The house needs repairs that cost thousands of dollars. Don't you care that your own daughter is going through difficulties?" I got up from my chair and walked to the edge of the terrace, from where I could see all of Miami lit up. "Simone, for 40 years your difficulties were my difficulties. Your debts were my debts. Your problems were my problems. But you decided that I was no longer part of your family. You cannot kick me out of your life when it suits you, and then ask me to return when it suits you." "So this is it? We are never going to speak again? I'm never going to see my mother again?" For the first time in the entire conversation, I felt a twinge of sadness. Despite everything, Simone was still the child I had raised, the daughter I had loved unconditionally, but she was also the woman who had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. "Simone," I finally said, "when you learn to respect my decisions, when you learn to see me as an independent woman with the right to live her own life, when you learn to love me without wanting to control me, maybe we can talk. But as long as you continue to see the animals as insignificant critters and me as a foolish old woman who must obey you, we have nothing to talk about. And what if I change? What if I really learn? Time will tell, I replied. But for now, I am very happy with my life as it is. I have a beautiful apartment, economic security, and the most loyal company in the world, I said, looking at Captain, who had come to put his head on my knee. I hung up the phone and sat back in my chair. The sun was setting over Miami Bay, painting the sky with colors I had never seen so intense. Luna snuggled into my lap. Star stretched out on her favorite cushion, and Captain lay down at my feet, like the faithful guardian he had always been. 2 years have passed since I arrived in Miami with Luna, Star, and Captain in search of a new life. This morning, as I prepared breakfast in my kitchen with an ocean view, I paused to observe how the sunlight filtered through the windows, creating golden patterns on the marble floor. It is in these moments of stillness that I reflect most on the path that brought me here. The woman I was 2 years ago no longer exists. That Jada who lived apologizing for existing, who apologized for taking up space, who measured every word not to bother anyone, was buried in Charlotte along with a life I thought was mine, but actually belonged to others. This new version of myself, the one who wakes up every day without asking permission to be happy, is a gift Andre gave me from beyond. Captain is now 14 years old and walks more slowly, but every morning he accompanies me to the bay walk with the same loyalty as always. His eyes still sparkle when he sees me prepare his leash, and I think he understands in some animal and wise way that we have both found our place in the world. Luna and Star have adapted to high-rise life with the typical elegance of cats, and my 2 new adoptees, Pearl and Cinnamon, have brought a youthful energy that keeps the whole house active. The money, which at first seemed like an abstract and unreal figure, has become a tool of freedom. Not just the economic freedom of not worrying about the bills for the month, but the emotional freedom of making decisions based on what I want to do, not on what others expect me to do. I have donated over $50,000 to animal shelters in the last 2 years, and every check I sign feels like an act of rebellion against the stingy and fearful woman I was for decades. I have also discovered simple pleasures that I had never allowed myself, taking painting classes on Tuesday afternoons, where my American classmates have taught me as much about life after 70 as they have about watercolor techniques, dining alone in elegant restaurants without feeling ashamed, because I have learned that a woman my age has the right to occupy a table for 2, even if she is alone. Buying books in English without checking the price, because for the first time in my life, I can afford the luxury of reading for pleasure. My relationship with Simone has evolved in ways I didn't expect. For the first year, we didn't speak at all. She needed to process the loss of control over my life, and I needed to establish firm boundaries without the influence of her manipulative voice. When she finally called me back 6 months ago, she sounded different, smaller, more human. She told me about her divorce from Desmond, about how psychological therapy had helped her understand that for years she had repeated patterns of control that she had learned not from us, but from a culture that taught her older women had no right to independence. It wasn't a complete apology, but it was an acknowledgement that she had made serious mistakes. We now talk once a month, short and civilized conversations, where she tells me about her work as a nurse in a public hospital, and I tell her about my cats and my painting classes. We haven't talked about money once in these 6 months, and that tells me she might finally be learning to see me as a complete person, not as a resource pool. I feel nostalgia for the life I left behind. Sometimes I miss the sound of the rain on the shingle roof of the house where I lived for decades. I miss the smell of coffee on cold mornings in Charlotte. I miss the conversations with the neighbors in the neighborhood park. But when that nostalgia appears, I walk to my terrace and look at the infinite sea stretching to the horizon. And I remember that nostalgia is a luxury that only those who have consciously chosen their present can afford. What surprises me most about this new life is how my relationship with solitude has changed. For years, I feared being alone. I confused solitude with abandonment. I believed I needed the constant validation of others to have value. Now I understand there is an abysmal difference between being alone and feeling lonely. I am alone in human terms, but I never feel lonely. I have my animals, I have my new friends, I have books, I have projects, I have plans for the future. I have also learned something fundamental about love. For decades, I believed that loving meant sacrificing yourself, disappearing, becoming invisible so that others could shine. I thought that being a good mother, a good wife, a good daughter-in-law meant not having needs of your own, not having dreams that didn't include others. Now I know that wasn't love. It was fear disguised as virtue. True love, the one my animals give me every day, doesn't demand impossible sacrifices. It doesn't ask you to give up yourself to demonstrate your devotion. True love celebrates your happiness, respects your decisions, and finds ways to grow alongside you instead of limiting you. Some nights when the apartment is silent and my 5 companions are sleeping each in their favorite spot, I sit on the terrace with a cup of tea and look at the stars reflecting in the bay. In those moments, I talk to Andre, not as a widow clinging to the past, but as a grateful woman who honors the gift he gave her, the opportunity to discover who she really was beneath all the masks she had worn for decades. "Thank you for knowing me better than I knew myself," I whisper to the salty wind. "Thank you for knowing that I needed this chance to be free, even when I didn't know I needed it." At 71, I have finally learned the most important lesson of all. It is never too late to start over. It is never too late to choose happiness over convenience. It is never too late to discover that true family is not the one imposed on you by blood ties, but the one you choose with your heart. And as I write these reflections in my diary with Luna purring on my lap and the sound of the waves as background music, I know with absolute certainty that this woman I am now, this free and complete Jada, is the version of myself that was always waiting for her moment to be born. Life, after all, didn't end at 69. It had just begun. You know, for years I thought my story ended the day my husband died and my daughter turned her back on me. But life surprised me. I learned that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself again. I stopped living for others and started living for me. And you know what? Peace feels a lot like freedom. If my story taught me anything, it's that it's never too late to choose yourself, to build a life that truly feels like yours. Happiness doesn't ask for permission. It waits for courage. So, if my journey touched your heart, remember, you can always start over, no matter your age. If you agree with me and enjoyed my story, show it by giving the video a like. Let's see how many of us there are. I'm curious, what city and what time are you listening from? Write it in the comments. If you'd like to support my journey, you can send me a small donation. Thank you for listening and for sharing your precious time with me. For more life stories like this, check out my other videos and subscribe to my channel. There are 2 new stories on screen that I'm sure you'll love. Click one and start listening. With love.